And I am Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Sinovac now joins the list of vaccines allowed for emergency use here in the Philippines.
Officials expect government-bought shots to land in the Philippines ideally by the end of next month. Greg Gregorio with The Big Story.
3 COVID-19 vaccines can now be used under the government's immunization program. After Pfizer and BioNTech and AstraZeneca, the local FDA has granted Chinese pharmaceutical Sinovac an emergency use permit.
Yung safety profile niya is good. Yung mga adverse event po nito is mild to moderate. The usual po, na pananakit sa braso, konting sinat, at ang rating po niya ay maganda doon po sa allergy and anaphylaxis.
Its interim Phase 3 trial data from ongoing trials in Brazil, Indonesia, and Turkey showed that it has 65.3% to 91.2% efficacy among the general public. 2 doses within a 4-week interval will be given to clinically healthy people 18 to 59 years old. But this is not recommended among health workers attending COVID-19 patients.
Ang nakita po kasi doon sa trial sa Brazil na binigay po ito doon sa mga COVID, sa mga health workers na nagtatrabaho po sa hospital na nagtitreat ng COVID-19 ay 50.4% ang efficacy niya. So, mas mabuti naman po yun kaysa sa wala, pero ang rekomendasyon po nga natin ng ating mga expert ay hindi po ito yung pinakamagandang bakuna para sa kanila.
Because of this, the government will revisit its prioritization list for vaccinees. Health Secretary Francisco Duque said 600,000 doses of donated Sinovac shots may be the first batch of COVID-19 vaccines to arrive in the country.
Mga 3 hanggang 5 araw ang hinihingi ng Chinese embassy para paghandaan ang pagpapadala ng naturang 600,000 Sinovac vaccines.
But as for the government-procured shots, this may take place no sooner than end of March, according to discussions in Senate.
Kailan na ho yung pirmahan for the supply agreement?
It's around 2 weeks from now is the answer I'm given.
After the signing, when can they deliver the Sinovac vaccine?
Before the end of March is the operative phrase that they are using, Your Honor.
The palace says the pending indemnification bill in both chambers of Congress will cover the deal between the Philippines and Sinovac. Sinovac is also expected to conduct late-stage trials in the Philippines. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
Lawmakers are targeting to pass today the bill that seeks to allocate an indemnification fund for the country's COVID-19 vaccination program. Ria Fernandez with the details.
If Senator Ping Lacson had his way, LGUs and the private sector should have the power to directly procure jobs, not only through a tripartite deal.
Kasi yung gain ng private sector will also be the gain of the administration and the entire country.
Senator Sonny Angara, sponsor of the vaccine procurement bill, says the measure only aims to ensure equitable distribution of vaccines. Nevertheless, he is open to amending the particular provision.
I think the concern is in the interim period, sino yung mauuna, concerns about equity, etc., Your Honor, orderly procedures.
On the proposed vaccine passport, he said it has been changed to a vaccine card instead to avoid the seeming mandatoriness. Meanwhile, senators expressed concern on the limited use of Sinovac shots in the country due to its relatively low efficacy rate. The Food and Drug Administration earlier said that the Chinese vaccine called Coronavac will not be offered to medical workers.
How will our citizens who are not frontliners, how will they feel if they are assigned the Sinovac dose rather than doses that have no qualification or have no, negative recommendations?
But Angara came to the defense of the FDA, clarifying that only those treating COVID-19 patients will be covered by the exemption. Senate Bill 2057 also ensures 500 million peso worth of indemnity fund for manufacturer security should the vaccines cause adverse effects. The upper chamber is expected to pass the measure on Monday night, as it has been certified as urgent by President Duterte. Its version over at the House of Representatives has already heard out the second reading. For News 5, Ria Fernandez, we are One News.
These are the other big stories tonight. President Duterte is not keen on shifting the country's quarantine status to MGCQ. According to his longtime aide, the president wants inoculation to begin before any easing happens. The president likewise rejects calls for a return to physical classes. The palace says that may have to wait until August when vaccine rollout is already underway. And a tropical depression Auring weakens into a low-pressure area, but not before affecting some 53,000 residents of Mindanao. These big stories right after the break.
Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. Before making landfall in the country, Auring unleashed heavy rainfall in parts of Mindanao over the weekend. This caused major flooding in several areas in Surigao del Sur. To give us more updates on the situation, we have Jem Avancenia reporting live from the municipality of Lianga. Jem, is the town still flooded?
Robbie, flood waters here in Surigao del Sur already subsided, but Tropical Storm Auring left quite a damage here in the province, especially in Tandag City and nearby towns. Using a tactical rope and life ring, the Lianga Search and Rescue Team braved the strong current of Lianga River. They had to evacuate a trapped Lumad family in Barangay Diatagon on Sunday. It was a risky operation.
Lisod kayo, ma'am, kay people yung nakadto sa area. Kuan na landslide na mo nagihan, tapos ang among kuan yanan lawom kayo kanang lapok ba lubong-lubong mi diri tama sa todo dili kari ang kuan kanang solo grabe kang kusog ang karin.
As floodwaters rose quickly across Lianga, the LGU had to implement forced evacuation. Over in Tandag, almost the entire city was flooded on Sunday as shown on Governor Ayek Pimentel's aerial photos. Floodwaters were shoulder high. The Philippine Coast Guard, PNP, Army and other rescue units assisted in evacuation efforts.
Yung hindi binaha, ever since hindi binaha kahapon, no? Kasi we're experiencing La Nina phenomenon. So medyo, yung soil medyo hindi na nakaka-absorb.
It was only this morning that the weather improved, allowing residents of Barangay San Agustin Sur to return to their homes to clean up dirt and mud. Grade 10 student Angel J can fight his tears after seeing his modules and books soaked in mud.
Basa tanan. Tapos wala mo kwartay ka kuan. Amoy pakadar ng bahay. Tapos amo module wa pa rin ako masikaso kay anamo baligya igo da mamaligya da kami ng isda tapos anamo ginansya ginagmeda.
In Barangay Marihatag, many houses were washed out because of the flash flood. As of Barangay Mararag, residents were unable to save their belongings as it only took 10 minutes for the water to rise. The same thing happened in nearby town San Agustin where almost 40 houses were damaged. Robbie, the Coast Guard already lifted the suspension of all vessels and watercraft trips today. Authorities are still assessing the amount of damage caused by Oring in the province. Robbie?
Maraming salamat, Jem. That was Jem Avancenia reporting from Surigao del Sur. Oring has weakened into a low-pressure area that has prompted Pag-asa to lift all warning signals. The center of the LPA was last spotted over the coastal waters of Rapu-Rapu, Albay. It's expected to continue bringing moderate to heavy rains over the Bicol region as well as over the provinces of Quezon, Marinduque, and Romblon. The NDRRMC says that more than 53,000 individuals are affected by Oring, some 49,000 of whom remain in evacuation centers. At least 179 houses were damaged by strong winds, while 3 roads and 1 bridge in regions 8, 9, and 10 are still not passable due to flooding.
Wet markets in Metro Manila went on another pork holiday as the hog supply promised by the government failed to reach sellers. The Agriculture Department looks into calling off the imposed 60-day price cap on meat products. Shaila Francisco with the details.
Customers were greeted with empty stalls in several wet markets in Quezon City. Retailers are staging a pork holiday today as they continue to await the DA's promised hog supply.
Hindi ko alam kung gagawin ko eh. Kasi pag manok, walang gaano bumibili ng ulam na manok, kundi baboy. Ewan ko kung gagawin ko. Magtitinolang manok na lang ako.
Even vegetable retailers felt the pinch of the pork holiday.
Pag walang manok, walang baboy, malaking dami ng tumala ng gulay. Katulad niya, walang tao. Kasi bago bumili ng baboy, bibili siyempre ng mga nilaga. Bibili ng pechay, patatas.
In Litex Market, the only retailers selling pork are those with leftover stock from last night as well as those selling above the price ceiling. Over in Murphy Market, all 50 meat vendors decided to stop selling pork, chicken, and beef products until tomorrow. They said they would rather close down than continue operations. Farmgate prices have reached 200 to 205 pesos per kilo. This means that retailers must sell pork at 290 to 310 pesos, which is above the price cap.
Mas malulugi kami pag nagtinda kami.
In Commonwealth Market, all 200 vendors stopped operations today while waiting for the hog supply as promised by the Agriculture Department. It turned out trucks of pigs from General Santos City and Bukidnon were stranded in Surigao due to heavy rains brought by Oring. The DA is now scrambling to look for other hog sources in nearby provinces such as Regions 3 and 4A.
The thing is, hindi naman po sila magkasundo sa presyo. Challenge pa rin po na makahanap ng baboy na kaya nilang bilhin.
At a Senate hearing today, senators scolded the DA for supposedly prioritizing pork imports after it recommended to lower the tariff on imported meat.
Why are you recommending that if that is wrong?
We have
parang you're washing your hand. You are DA. You should protect the local industry.
In response, the DA said this was just a temporary solution and that they are also ironing out programs for the local sector. For agricultural economic professors from UP Los Baños, this only goes to show that imposing a price cap to address supply issues will not work. The DA said it will study costs to remove the price ceiling in Metro Manila. The agency meanwhile reported that it already has a list of traders allegedly diverting hog shipments from Mindanao to areas outside Metro Manila. The DA said they understand that it is a business decision for some dealers, but they stress that the transport subsidy only covers hogs delivered to markets in the capital region. Shaila Francisco, VR1 News.
Time for an express look at some of the day's big stories. The UP Octa research saw a slight uptrend in new cases in Metro Manila over the past week. Reproduction number in the region is back above threshold at 1.13. New cases in Pasay City nearly doubled in the previous week, prompting officials to impose a localized lockdown in the city. The DOH reported 2,288 cases today, the highest single daily jump since November last year. 18 more persons test positive for the UK variant, according to the Health Department. This brings the total number of British variant COVID infections in the country to 62. And out of the 18 infected, 13 are returning OFWs who entered the country last month. And President Duterte is rejecting proposals to resume face-to-face classes. House spokesman Harry Roque said the president thinks it may be better to wait once vaccines have been rolled out. Roque says that in-person learning might not happen until August. Time for another quick break. When we return, the president is holding off on plans to loosen restrictions across the country to MGCQ. And would you be more confident to take COVID-19 shots if it meant getting free booze? Well, that's a trade in a bar in Israel. A look at the gimmick after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. The Philippines has yet to officially administer even a dose of any COVID-19 vaccine, but various countries are already making strides in their vaccination campaigns. Tonight's big number, 205 million. That's the number of COVID-19 vaccine doses administered across 92 countries so far. This is being reported by Bloomberg. Superpowers US and China are leading the rollout, but other Asian developing economies have started theirs as well. Indonesia has administered 1.9 million shots, Bangladesh 1.8 million, and even conflict-stricken Myanmar has 100,000. Meanwhile, up to this point, a lot of people in the country are still at a loss regarding vaccines, especially when it comes to efficacy. One News Chief Correspondent Ed Lingao joins us to discuss the matter. Ed,
Hi, Robbie.
Kanina, we were hearing a lot about with Sinovac coming in. We were talking about safety, the safety numbers there. FDA is saying, look, it looks like it's safe, but efficacy is another matter. I mean, has things moved in terms of, it sounds like a basic question, but with efficacy numbers for Sinovac at anywhere from 62 to now 91%, what exactly does that refer to?
Okay, well, one thing to remember, first of all, is that it's a pretty common misconception that the vaccine will keep you from contracting or catching the disease. What it will do is stop or prevent severe infection or severe symptoms that could cause you hospitalization. So, for example, the efficacy numbers that you were talking about a while ago that have been published over the past few months, you're actually looking at numbers that are a range of efficacies with levels of effectiveness. For example, when Pfizer says that it is 95% effective, it simply means it's 95% effective in preventing severe infections. Now, what about preventing asymptomatic or mild infections? Well, there's no data on that yet. However, other vaccines like AstraZeneca, that's 70 to 90% effective against severe infections. You have to look at the other number, which is mild to asymptomatic infections. That's at 58.9%. Sinovac is the same thing. Sinovac claims 100% effectiveness in preventing hospitalization. Now you're looking at the different number, 70% for preventing severe symptoms and 50.4% in preventing mild to asymptomatic infections. So what it simply means is iba yung hindi ka ma-hospital pero ibang number naman yung kung ikaw ba ay magkakasakit na malubha.
And nothing has changed there. These are still basically, this refers to all the numbers that we've been looking at since last year. It really refers to serious cases and serious symptoms. It does not mean hindi ka na magkakasakit.
Precisely. Actually, what it also means is this, there is no data yet as to whether or not you can transmit the virus once you are vaccinated, which also puts into question yung concept ng herd immunity. Because herd immunity is based on the idea that 70% of your population is vaccinated. Therefore, you cannot have 70% or 7 out of 10 people transmitting the virus. But that puts everything into question. The WHO, the New England Journal of Medicine, the Lancet, they all say that all these vaccines so far, because there has not been enough time to test all these vaccines, there is no data yet as to whether or not they can prevent transmission. That is still, in other words, the jury is still out as far as that is concerned. So, maaring hindi, maaring oo pa rin.
Okay, Bok, maraming salamat. That's Ed Lingao, and we will continue that conversation on the Chiefs immediately after the big story. President Rodrigo Duterte is not keen on placing the country under the least restrictive modified general community quarantine. Palace spokesman Harry Roque says the president has directed the cabinet that unless there is a rollout of vaccines, the country cannot be placed under MGCQ. He says the president also wants vaccination to start at the soonest possible time. His longtime aide, Senator Bongo, says the president is confident that Filipinos and economic managers will understand his decision.
Let's take a look at the biggest stories on print and online. The Philippine Star reports that the Philippines is at risk of sustaining permanent economic scars from the COVID-19 pandemic. Citing S&P Global Ratings, the report states that a permanent loss of 12.6% is projected should economic recovery stall for 6 months. This one from Business World, Baguio City has announced a possible partnership with Metro Global Holdings Corporation for an 11.5 billion peso mass transport project. According to the company's proposal, the project will be composed of a 4-kilometer elevated monorail and a series of feeder lines with battery-powered buses. And in an exclusive interview with News 5, one of the parents of Manoba students supposedly rescued in Cebu confessed that she was forced to enroll her kid to a modular schooling activity. But Attorney King Anthony Perez, counsel of those arrested, was quick to clarify that the guardians signed consent forms prior to sending their children to Cebu.
And here are the other big stories from around the world. Boeing is recommending that air carriers halt flights of its 777 airplanes. That's until the Federal Aviation Administration issues inspection protocols. This comes after a United Airlines Boeing 777 aircraft suffered a right engine failure in Colorado over the weekend. And a study in Israel found that the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine is 85% effective just after the first dose. A separate study by Canadian researchers also shows Pfizer's efficacy of 92.6% after the first shot. Due to these findings, Canadian experts suggested to delay second Pfizer doses given the high level of protection from the first dose. This is to raise the number of people who can receive the vaccine.
Time for the big stories in sports. Novak Djokovic is bound for some time off after his sweet success in the Australian Open. After a record-extending victory over Daniil Medvedev, Djokovic will spend some time on the sidelines to recover. The tennis star had muscle tear in the later rounds of his championship match, and it's still a sweet moment though as he paraded his trophy in a beach area in Melbourne. Japan's Naomi Osaka, meanwhile, is setting her sights on new smashing venues, possibly in the French Open and Wimbledon. After outplaying American Jennifer Brady in the Australian Open, Osaka said she wants to be comfortable on other surfaces and add more titles to her belt. Moving now to esports, will we see a Bren lang Sakalam trend part 2? Well, hopefully. The group is set to take the international stage once again, this time for Valorant after they booked the first slot for the Southeast Asian Masters tournament. Bren led a convincing 3-1 victory against Archangel shortly after making waves for winning the world title in Mobile Legends.
After 7 years, reality star Kim Kardashian has filed for divorce from her husband, rapper Kanye West. Rumors of a relationship in tatters have been ongoing for months. But the supposed nail on the coffin, Kanye's failed bid for the presidency. Hi, Queen! From divorce to drag, Oscar-winning actress Anne Hathaway appears in the latest episode of RuPaul's Drag Race. When asked by New York-based Rosie Gamely if there's any role she fought tooth and nail for, she had this to say.
I will give you some tea.
Yeah.
I was the 9th choice for Devil Wears Prada.
Now we know Emily Charlton actually meant it when she told Andy Sachs in The Devil Wears Prada, 1 million girls would kill for her job. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
Let's go back to Israel. A bar is offering free shots for those who are willing to shoot their shot for Pfizer shots. Genia Gastropub has partnered with municipality officials to encourage Israelis to get vaccinated against COVID-19. What's in it for them? Drinks on the house. And you would think health, di ba? The drinks are non-alcoholic though. That's important to stress. Non-alcoholic as a medical precaution. Dozens of patrons have lined up for a jab with no tab. Once done, a vaccine ought to share a vaccinee rather should share a toast with the nurse.
I really think we should follow that model.
Lalo na ngayon, di ba? Confidence is still low. Anything that works, anything that convinces people. And let's emphasize, non-alcoholic because we don't know what the effect of alcohol will be on the vaccine.
Kahit anong libre, mahilig ang Pinoy sa libre.
Oh,
mag-work yan. Good
anything
idea.
that can bring it up.
That wraps up today's big story. My name is Gretchen Hall. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News. Good evening.